My dear sister, listen carefully. Most of your pain did not come from what people did to you. It came from how much you needed them to be something they were never meant to be. You needed their attention to feel valued. You needed their approval to feel secure. You needed their presence to feel whole. And the moment they withdrew, your heart collapsed. This is not because you are weak. It is because you placed a human-sized heart in a God-sized position. The day a woman stops needing people for emotional survival, something extraordinary happens. She does not become hard. She does not become arrogant. She becomes anchored. And when your heart is anchored in Allah, nothing in this world can shake you. Let me walk you through this transformation. Slowly, honestly, without illusion. My dear sister, understand this clearly, because if you miss this point, everything else will remain blurry. The moment you need someone emotionally, you give them a position they were never meant to occupy. You hand them the keys to your inner world. You allow their behavior, something you cannot control, to determine how you feel inside your own chest. When they speak kindly, you feel alive. When they sound distant, your chest tightens. When they disappear, your peace collapses. This is not because you are dramatic or weak. It is because the heart is powerful, and whatever you attach it to gains power over you. Needing someone means their tone can ruin your day. Their attention can validate your existence. Their silence can make you question your worth. Slowly, without realizing it, you stop living from your own center and begin living in reaction to someone else. That is not love. That is emotional dependency. Islam never taught us to live like this. Islam did not raise women to beg emotionally, waiting to be chosen, noticed, reassured, or saved. Allah created the heart with a specific design. It was created to rely first on the one who never changes, never abandons, never gets distracted, and never withholds love as a punishment. When you place a human being in that position, suffering becomes inevitable. Why? Because people are unstable by nature, not evil, unstable. Today, they are present. Tomorrow, they are overwhelmed. Today, they care deeply. Tomorrow, their priorities shift. Today, they promise. Tomorrow, they forget. This is not cruelty. It is humanity. But when your heart depends on something unstable, it becomes unstable too. This is why some women feel constantly anxious in relationships, not because they love too much, but because they rely too much. Their emotional safety is tied to someone who cannot possibly carry that weight. No human can. When you need someone, you unconsciously give them power. And power, even when unintended, changes behavior. People sense dependency. They feel it in the way you tolerate what hurts you, the way you explain yourself too much, the way you stay quiet to avoid loss. Neediness makes you flexible where you should be firm. It makes you patient where you should be honest. It makes you accept crumbs because you are afraid of having nothing. And the heart knows when it is betraying itself. That is why dependency never brings peace. It brings constant monitoring. You watch their mood. You analyze their words. You overthink their silence. Your mind never rests because your heart is not anchored. Allah did not create you to live like this. Reliance in Islam is not emotional detachment from people. It is emotional placement in the correct order. Allah first, everything else second. When Allah is first, people become companions, not lifelines. Their presence becomes a blessing, not a necessity. Their absence becomes painful, but not destructive. The woman who stopped needing people did not wake up cold or bitter. She woke up honest. She realized that her exhaustion was not coming from love, but from dependence, from carrying expectations that no human could fulfill. She stopped outsourcing her peace. That is a powerful sentence, because many women do exactly that without realizing it. They outsource their peace to a husband, a friend, a parent, a message, a reply, a reaction. As long as those external things behave correctly, they feel okay. When they don't, everything collapses. But peace was never meant to be outsourced. Peace is an internal state rooted in trust in Allah. When that trust weakens, the heart starts grabbing onto people, hoping they will stabilize what only Allah can. Once this woman understood that, she began to reclaim ownership of her inner world. She stopped asking people to fill spaces only Allah could fill. She stopped expecting permanence from temporary beings. And something remarkable happened. The chaos quieted. Not because life became perfect, not because people suddenly behaved better, but because her heart was no longer reacting to every fluctuation. She stopped giving people the power to decide her emotional weather. She still loved, she still cared, but her love was no longer desperate. It was dignified. This is the difference between attachment and reliance. Attachment says, I cannot survive without you. Reliance says, I trust Allah, whether you stay or leave. When you stop needing people, you don't lose relationships. You lose fear. You lose the constant anxiety of being abandoned, misunderstood, or replaced. You lose the inner noise that comes from placing your heart in unstable hands. And that loss is not a loss at all. It is relief. Because the heart, once returned to its proper place, finally rests. And a resting heart is a powerful heart. My dear sister, this is where many hearts become confused, and this confusion costs years of pain. You say, I love deeply. But pause and ask yourself honestly, is it love or is it attachment? Because Islam makes a very clear distinction between the two, even if we do not always name it. Love is calm. Attachment is anxious. Love gives. Attachment clings. Love trusts Allah with outcomes. Attachment panics at the thought of loss. When emotional attachment disguises itself as love, it feels intense, overwhelming, and consuming. It makes you believe that the depth of your pain proves the depth of your love. But intensity is not evidence of purity. Sometimes it is evidence of fear. Attachment says, I cannot function without you. Love says, I want you, but my existence does not collapse without you. This difference is not small. It is life-changing. Many women stay trapped in emotional turmoil because they think letting go of attachment means letting go of love. So they hold on harder. They tolerate more. They sacrifice themselves more. And with every sacrifice, they lose a little more peace. Islam does not ask you to erase yourself to prove love. Love in Islam has boundaries. It has dignity. It has balance. The Prophet ﷺ loved deeply, yet his heart was never dependent on creation. His attachment was always upward toward Allah, never outward in a way that enslaved him. When your heart becomes attached to someone, you begin to fear their absence more than you value your principles. You stay quiet when you should speak. You accept behavior you would never advise another woman to accept. You compromise your inner compass to preserve the connection. That is not love. That is fear of loss. Attachment feeds on insecurity. It whispers, if I lose them, I lose myself. So you overthink, you overgive, you overexplain, you overstay. Love does the opposite. Love is steady. It does not beg to be chosen because it knows its worth does not come from being chosen by a human being. The woman who stopped needing anyone began to see this clearly. She realized that much of what she called love was actually attachment rooted in emptiness. Not emptiness because she was lacking, but emptiness because her heart was not being filled from the right source. When Allah is not the primary source of emotional security, the heart will desperately search elsewhere, and whoever it attaches to becomes the emotional center of gravity. That is why attachment hurts so much, because you are asking a human to do the job of the divine. No human can handle that responsibility. People get tired, they get distracted, they get overwhelmed. Sometimes they leave, sometimes they stay, but change. Attachment does not know how to cope with this reality, so it turns every change into a threat. Love, however, understands impermanence. Love accepts that people are gifts, not guarantees. This woman did not stop loving when she stopped being attached. She stopped panicking. She stopped confusing longing with loyalty. She stopped equating suffering with sincerity. She learned that love does not demand constant reassurance. Attachment does. Attachment says, "Tell me again, prove it again, don't leave, don't change." Love says, "I trust Allah with your heart and mine." When attachment dissolves, love actually becomes purer. There is no longer manipulation, fear, or silent resentment hiding beneath the affection. There is choice, conscious choice, and choice is powerful. The woman who stopped needing anyone learned to love without chains. She could care without controlling. She could give without emptying herself. She could walk away without hatred. Because attachment creates fear, and fear poisons love. This is why detachment feels terrifying at first. The ego believes that if attachment disappears, connection will disappear too. But what actually disappears is anxiety. What remains is clarity. She began to ask herself different questions. Not, how do I keep them? But, is this pleasing to Allah? Not, what if I lose them? But, what am I losing by staying like this? These questions brought her back to herself. Love does not require you to lose your self-respect. Love does not require you to abandon your values. Love does not require emotional collapse every time someone pulls away. That version of love is unsustainable. It drains the heart until bitterness replaces tenderness. When the woman released attachment, she did not become cold. She became balanced. Her emotions stopped swinging violently based on someone else's behavior. Her heart became grounded. She could love without desperation. She could miss without falling apart. She could be present without being consumed. And most importantly, she could let go when holding on began to harm her relationship with Allah. That is the ultimate measure. Anything that distances you from Allah is not love, no matter how intense it feels. And anything that brings you closer to Allah, even if it hurts, is mercy. Emotional attachment fades when the heart is filled correctly. When Allah becomes the anchor, people become additions, not necessities. And when love is no longer driven by fear, it finally becomes what it was always meant to be, a source of tranquility, not torment. My dear sister, this is a truth many women resist because it feels uncomfortable. But discomfort does not make it false. People can sense when you need them. They may not say it out loud. They may not even be fully conscious of it themselves. But they feel it in your tone, in your patience, in your willingness to tolerate what hurts you just to keep the connection alive. Need creates an imbalance. An imbalance always changes behavior. When someone knows you need them emotionally, the relationship quietly shifts, effort decreases. Accountability weakens. Respect becomes optional. Not always because they are cruel, but because human nature responds to power, even subtle power. If someone knows you won't leave, they stop being careful. This is why a woman who needs someone often finds herself doing more while receiving less. She explains herself more. She waits longer. She forgives faster. She convinces herself that patience means silence and loyalty means endurance. But patience in Islam was never meant to be self-erasure. When you need someone, you unconsciously teach them that your boundaries are flexible, that your pain can be negotiated, that your standards can be postponed, and the heart feels this betrayal long before the mind admits it. Needing someone makes you afraid of upsetting them, so you soften your truth, you delay difficult conversations, you swallow discomfort to avoid abandonment. Slowly, you begin to shrink, and people notice that shrinking. They may not exploit it intentionally, but the dynamic changes nonetheless. You become predictable, safe, taken for granted, not cherished, assumed. The woman who stopped needing anyone noticed this pattern in her life. She saw how much emotional labor she was doing just to maintain connections that gave her anxiety instead of peace.